I'm Dr. Phil Parker. I've been asked by a number of people for some help via videos. So this is a particular issue that people often comment and ask me about, which is tinnitus. Now, tinnitus is a pretty awful thing to have. I've had it at some point in my life and managed to get rid of it, luckily. But it's one of those things that can really do your head in, because it's a sound, very often a ringing or buzzing in your ear, particularly tends to hit you when things are quiet. So when you go to bed, you tend to get it. Can often be drowned out by external noise, and one of the treatments is to have a white noise in the background to counteract its effects. But there is some stuff you can do that will help you to switch it off, which is even better. And there's two phases to this. One is about training your brain to turn down the volume, and the other is about finding ways to feel much more comfortable with it, because in fact we often hear noises all the time that we're not particularly aware of. So if anybody was to pause for a minute, there's probably loads of ambient sounds you can hear. What's happening with tinnitus is it's almost like the volume is being turned up, the sensitivity to those sounds, so we hear those sounds a lot more than we normally would. So the idea is that most people actually probably have tinnitus. They have some kind of ambient ringing in their ears, and most people just able to switch it off. In the same way, when you wake up in the morning, you put your clothes on, you feel your clothes to start with, and then after a while, you just switch it off. So we have that ability to switch off all kinds of signals, both internally generated and external noises, external stimulus. We do have the ability to switch those off. So it's about training our brain to downregulate, to switch off, to find those noises, those sounds, to be something that's much less significant for us. So I'm going to teach you a few techniques to help you to do that. To begin this process of learning how to switch off, to switch down, to turn the volume down or switch it off completely, of these signals that you don't need anymore. Allow yourself to begin by getting comfortable. So when you're watching and listening to this, take a few moments to create some space where you're not going to be disturbed, where you can just focus on the sound of my voice. And what I'd like you to do first of all, as you breathe in and out, and just gently begin the process of relaxation, is to pay attention to the sound of my voice, and also to notice the words I'm using, both consciously and unconsciously, and the spaces in between the words. Because the first thing you need to do is just to let your shoulders go, let your breathing relax, and allow your whole nervous system to just calm down, to settle. A bit like a muddy pool that's been stirred up. Just to allow time, to allow the mud to fall to the bottom and the water to come back to being still and clear again. And all you need to do as you listen in this new way to my words and the spaces in between is to begin the process of training your brain to remember that it can relax deeply, even more deeply now than you might have imagined. And to remember that you have already switched off so many pieces of information. As I said earlier, when you wake up in the morning and you put your clothes on, you feel them to start with, and then after a while, there's no need for you to put your attention there, and so your attention drifts to more interesting things. This is a natural ability that we all have. And so as you allow yourself to float back in time, to a time when it's really clear to you that you could switch off different signals. Could be a time when you're wearing glasses or some jewelry, a watch, a bracelet, a ring, some shoes that were new, which you felt to start with, but after a while you just switched off those feelings. Allow yourself now to really step back into this moment, connecting with how it feels to be able to turn down the volume, to delete those pieces of information that aren't useful for you. Knowing that your body has an amazing ability to process thousands and thousands of pieces of information and to choose which bits are important to raise your consciousness, which bits we don't need to think about. Every joint, for instance, the muscles and the ligaments are constantly giving your body information about where it is in space, how tight or relaxed the muscles are, how warm it is, how much it's moving, how much fluid is in it. And yet, most of the time, the information isn't important enough. And so, a little part of our brain that's responsible for choosing which information is presented to our conscious mind and which bit isn't important, looks at it and decides, at the moment, this isn't something that's of any relevance. We can let this just slide. In the same way, allow your unconscious mind, which is the part of you that takes care of you, to spend some time recalibrating, turning down that sensation. Some people like to imagine it like turning a radio dial, turning the volume down. Some people imagine it like a slider. Other people imagine it a bit like a kind of slight ratchet mechanism, turning it one space at a time. As you do it, just really engage with using your imagination to switch and dial that down. Now, recognizing that you don't need any more to put your attention here, because your attention can go somewhere else. Maybe you'd like to pour that attention into another part of your body. Maybe your breathing. Noticing how your breath feels as you breathe in your chest, how your tummy and diaphragm feel as you breathe. Really paying close attention to that. Noticing how this feels. And also noticing every time you listen to this, you're learning, because your brain is always switched on to learning. Switching on to learning, which allows you to switch off, turn down the volume on other signals each time you listen. In a minute, I'm going to switch to a story I recorded before, which is all about and specifically designed to help people to switch off these kind of internal sounds comes from a very famous hypnotherapist and psychiatrist called Dr. Milton Erickson. And I invite you and your unconscious mind to listen to this and to notice what happens as a result of allowing your body to learn new things in a new way. Just breathe, just for a moment, and then just follow the sound of my voice. And for many of you who know, there are a number of things I do when I help people to relax deeply. And some of them are quite obvious in that my voice slows down and the pitch becomes lower as we start to become more relaxed. And the reason for this is that your brain has an ability to tune in to whatever's going on around you through these mirror neurons that we have. So the more I become slow and calm, the more you'll find that your nervous system starts to settle. But there's other things that other people know who've studied with me over the years will recognize, and you can allow your conscious mind to notice some of those things, some of those clever and interesting things, because whenever we do this, we actually communicate on about 4 or 5 different levels. But you don't need to consciously be aware of that, because your unconscious mind is paying attention to all the words I'm saying, and also to the spaces in between the words. And as you do, I'd just like you to notice how your shoulders can just let go. How your breathing is now just a little bit more, even more, feeling the way that you already recognized that it needed to. And I'd like you to listen to a story about someone I mentioned earlier, Milton Erickson, who was an incredible speaker, physician, psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and healer. And what was extraordinary about him was he didn't need to do very much to help people to deeply, deeply relax. He would say to people, all you need to do right now, he'd say to them, is just to allow yourself to pay attention on a new level, he'd say. And he told a story once about going to a bell making factory. And you may not know that Erickson had polio at an early age, and later on probably had a stroke and was only able to move a little bit, but he was still able to communicate extraordinary levels of depth just with his voice. And when he was a young medical student, he was wandering down the street, and off to one side he noticed the arch of a bell factory, somewhere where they made bells. And as he said, because you're an interesting and intrigued kind of person, decided to go on an adventure. He went down the alley, never been there before, but he found his way. And there at the bottom of the alley he saw the doors open to the factory, and he stepped through, and the noise inside the factory was really quite loud. You can be curious why it was loud. Well, in a factory, sometimes when it's busy, hammering and clanging, shaping metal, bending it, forging it, because even the most solid, hard metal, when you heat it to the right temperature and the right environment, becomes fluid, flows, can be stretched, shaped any way that you want. You just have to have a mind to do it. And he did, as he walked through the factory. He saw all the workers being busy, and he went to the office of the manager and he said, "I'm very interested in all sorts of things." And the manager said, "So you're very interested in all sorts of things, are you?" He says, "Yeah, I've seen your factory and I don't know how you guys," looking down at the shop floor, "see people communicating to each other and hearing each other and speaking. I can't hear them at all. There's all this noise. It's just impossible. I just don't understand. And I'd like to explore this a bit more. Would it be okay if tonight I came and put my sleeping bag just somewhere out of the way, somewhere near one of the factory machines, just to see what it's like?" And the manager said, "Okay." So that evening, much, much later, when the night was falling, Erickson walked down to the factory, and there he found himself a little place out of the way where he could just gently and easily snuggle down, settle down, almost as easily as a cat resting in the warm sunshine. Just feeling that calm, easy feeling. And initially, of course, it was a little bit less quiet than he wanted it to be, but he found with time, just being still, much like the water, the sound started to wash over him. And before he knew it, his body became more and more comfortable. His mind settled and calm. And he reached that really interesting place, the doorway between being not asleep and being really sleepy. And he kind of thought to himself in a distant way, it's really interesting to feel this sleepy sleep feeling. And as he thought this sleepy sleep feeling, he found himself just gently comfortably drifting. And before he knew it, the sun streaming in through the dirty windows of the factory. And one of the workers, who didn't know he was there, stumbled over him and cursed him for getting in the way. And Erickson said, "Sorry." The guy said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I was just doing an experiment to see if I could understand a little bit more about how the brain works." Said the man as he wandered off. And at that point, Erickson suddenly realized and so as you allow yourself to learn what it is that's important for you, how this very particular story relates specifically and directly to that thing that you were thinking about making change with, now as you think about it, how that shifts your awareness of the resources you have available to you, and how bringing yourself with this new understanding allows you to navigate and move through all sorts of environments, spaces and places, allows you to deliver a whole range of new ways of being, new actions, behaviours that really fulfill on the innate capabilities you have within you. Those skills and qualities that allow you to do all the incredible things that you've done over the years. And how recognizing who you are and what you're capable of reminds you of the things that are really important for you. Whether it's what you do, or where you put your attention, or who you hang out with, how you spend your time, or what your values are in terms of, this is important to me, and how that reignites that deep familiarity that we all have, do we not, with actually who we really are inside. Sometimes we forget, we wander off one way or another. But in those moments of clarity, reconnecting with who we are, who we know ourselves to be, and how by doing that allows us to recognize what we can bring into the bigger picture, the lives of others, the passions, excitements. And by connecting with that, we feel a sense of, you know what, maybe what I need to focus on isn't those things that I used to think were pressing or important. Maybe instead, I just need to reconnect, to bring myself in each and every moment from this new place. And notice when I do this, how much easier it is to find my way. And you know, as Erickson wandered back up the street, he said, you know what? There's always something There's always something you can learn. And sometimes you learn these things in the most unusual places when you weren't even expecting to recognize that there were things you thought you'd forgotten that you remember, that you realized a long, long time ago you'd already remembered. And so as you allow yourselves to gently and comfortably bring yourself back to this room, to this waterfall, knowing that just by listening to this and switching yourself into a different state, it has at least two very powerful and important processes. First is your whole body just switches down from maybe some activity to calm, parasympathetic, nurturing, healing, thoughtful recovery you. But the other thing that's really important is not only is there a temporary effect of getting into that state, it's quite nice. Let me know if you're coming back to the room how it felt to go through that process. But the other thing that's really important is that the more you practice getting into this state, activating this neurology, then the easier it is to re-access that again and again. And this starts to become your default setting. This starts to become who you are because of doing it so often. Behaviors that we practice become permanent. So just by spending a few moments calming, refocusing, you will allow yourself to develop the neurological muscle of how to be even better going forwards at doing this. So now that you've listened to that story, both consciously and unconsciously, allow yourself to trust your nervous system to reboot, reset, to learn, rebalance, take things back to exactly how they should be. And if you want to know more about techniques to help you get back in charge of your nervous system, then come and visit my website. We have lots of programs that you can get hold of. And the ultimate thing for resolving these kind of things is, of course, the lightning process. So see how you get on with listening to this, see what changes you can make. Hopefully, by listening to this enough times, you'll find it will reduce further and further and further and further until it's just something that is of no consequence to you. If you need further support, there is further support. Let me know how you get on.